Okay, small update. One, this telephone is being returned. It just wasn't hitting on a whole lot for me. Second update, this notebook, which I have done every deep dive and video on. When I started like seriously doing deep dives, I started folding the pages, but like this is all the way back Twilight Cup. This was all the way back in the Twilight Cup when I wrote down like all of my top choices from each type. So anyways, once I started, folding the pages and everything, kind of told me like which videos didn't come to fruition. How to deal with the kings. Yeah, that never became a full-fledged video. And then we had several weeks of just everything became a video. In the Rainbow Cup, I was gonna do a versus of every poison typing. Then we had several weeks again until most recently, I was gonna do a versus video on the Pokemon inside of the Jungle Cup that actually got Charm. Which brings us to today, the most recent page that isn't folded, Yanma. So today, since we're talking about Yanma, let's quickly go over some stats that we have for Yanma. Here we have a bug and flying type Pokemon maxing out at 1470, which actually means that 15s across the board. At level 40, we are still available to participate in the Great League. Some drawbacks to that are, of course, having to find the perfect, and having to power it up all the way to level 40 is very costly. Now, according to my spreadsheets and all the numbers that I have, we should do around 109 in bulk and 114th in stat product, which is unfortunately not amazing considering roughly 200 participants. That does mean we're on the lower side of that, so Then we do have all of this coming from our base stats here, which is a 154 on attack, a 94 defense, and a 163 on stamina. Those are okay. Honestly, if these two were flipped, it would make a little bit more sense for PvP, but I mean, we're just going to kind of have to rock with what we've got. That actually moves us into our moves here, which I actually really like Yanma's moveset. So when it comes down to our fast moves, we basically have Quick Attack or Wing Attack here. They're both going to be the exact same energy per turn. They're both actually going to be the exact same damage per turn, except Wing Attack is actually going to have stab benefits, which does bump it up a little bit higher than Wing Attack. So for 3.5 energy per turn on both of these for 2.5 damage per turn, Wing Attack definitely ends up winning out, bumping it up to a 3 on the damage per turn, which, I mean, just makes a lot of sense. Why would you use Quick Attack, especially in this cup, over Wing Attack here? So definitely going to go with Wing Attack for our fast move. Then we do move on to our charge moves, which all coincidentally have the exact same energy cost to fire. So Ancient Power, Aerial Ace, and Silver Wind all cost 45 energy to fire. Now there's a couple of different damage discrepancies here. So Ancient Power is going to give us 70 damage per turn at a 1.56. We don't get stab off of that, unfortunately. We do have Aerial Ace, which is going to do 55 damage for a 1.22 damage per energy ratio, bumping it up to a 66 after stab, which is a 1.47 on the damage per energy ratio. And Silver Wind clocking in with 70 damage at a 1.56. After stab, it does get bumped up to 84 for a 1.87. So out of all those moves, it honestly would just come down to what you want in your Yanma. Really what you feel like you need more coverage for. I could see merits to doing the Ancient Power and Aerial Ace, because Ancient Power is going to help you in the mirror match and a lot of the bug flying type Pokemon that are running around. That will definitely help there. Aerial Ace I could see being also very beneficial because it'll help up against the grasses and it'll help up against the bugs as well. But Silver Wind I could also see kind of helpful because it is going to be our most damaging move, our most efficient one here. Plus you have the added benefit of some stat changes if you do hit that. And it's going to hit the grass types for super effective damage while doing pretty much neutral damage to everything else. So for the video today, we're actually going to be taking a look at Wing Attack, Ancient Power, and Silver Wind. So the reason that I decided to go with that setup is because of the damage that both Ancient Power and Silver Wind actually provide us. Even though Aerial Ace has a stab benefit here, even after stab it doesn't quite end up at the same damage that Ancient Power does. Plus I like the idea of being able to cover the same typings that we are, the bug and the flying types. Plus Silver Wind, you know, I like to just be a kamikaze type player, so if I get that stat change, then it's just icing on the cake for me. So with that in mind, let's actually jump over to some shielding situations that we have here up against the entire cup. We're actually going to start off with our 0 versus 0, which is actually going to be a 47.8%, which isn't too bad. That's not too shabby. I do like to see at least a 50% there though. Next we move on to our 2 versus 0, which is a 95.5%. And oddly enough, even though we have complete shield advantage, I'm looking for the Pokemon that still end up beating us here. There are 3 big Pokemon that end up beating us here: Wigglytuff and the Rock Boys. So both Alolan Graveler and Alolan Golem will still end up beating us even though we have complete shield advantage. And both of those aren't too surprising considering we do have a super duper weakness to the rock typing here. But Wigglytuff having that charm is just so powerful, insanely powerful here. Next we're actually going to move on to our 0 versus 2, which is where this time my opponent actually has complete shield advantage. We actually end up only winning 6% here, which is kind of low. I mean, but this number is generally pretty low, but 6% is kind of even low there. I do like to see double digits here. And the Pokemon that we still end up beating here, it's kind of sporadic. So we do have a few grass and a few bug. Not huge notable wins here, but basically because we do have access to some moves that are going to be damaging to both the grass and the bug typing, we just kind of have our way with a few of the less stat-driven Pokemon, if you will. Our last shield scenario up against the entire cup is actually going to be the 2v2, which is actually a 44%, which, okay, I can get behind that. What that ends up telling me is that our 2v2 being so much lower than our 0 versus 0 means that we're basically going to do better if we close with Yanma rather than if we open. We do statistically win more if all the shields are exhausted throughout the entire match and we start from scratch with our last 2 Pokemon. So to get some visual representation of these matchups, we're actually going to go into PvPoke here. You're going to see that we have our Wing Attack, Silver Wind, and Ancient Power on our Yanma here. 1 shield for ourselves. We're actually going to do a multi-battle here up against the entire Jungle Cup with 1 shield for our opponent as well. Once we hit battle, you can see that our 1v1 actually shoots up to a 55.2. Now we talked a little bit about this in the versus video, I'm pretty sure, between Yanma and Yanmega. It's quite interesting that whenever I myself have 1 shield and my opponent also has 1 shield, that we end up having more wins than when we don't have any shields whatsoever or we both have 2 shields. It's just kind of an odd placement there. So to start looking at some of these typings here, let's start with the bug type. Now basically we do have a lot of wins in this category. You can see we have a ton of wins, but when we get down towards the bottom, you can see that we do have some interesting losses here. So not to stray too far away from these, Beedrill, Yanma, and Yanmega are all going to be ties, just for your information. Then we do have Scyther, Fortress, Masquerain, Venomoth, Scizor, and Armaldo as the losses from the bugs. Now Scyther, Masquerain, and Venomoth, kind of interesting ones there. I really think that it comes down to a lot of our stats, and then Venomoth just kind of has a lot to work with, especially with Confusion. It's definitely going to be hitting pretty hard, while it's also got just, its stats are a little bit better than ours, especially like if we look back at our base stats, that 94 is pretty low, which is kind of what ends up hurting us quite a bit here. But definitely Scyther and Masquerain are definitely going to be a lot more stat driven than we are, whereas Fortress and Scizor definitely going to be able to have some neutrality in the matchup, especially with their typing, carrying steel typing, versus what we can kind of throw at it. We don't really have too much that we can hit it for more than neutral damage, so kind of stuck there. And then Armaldo is going to have some sweet rock action to throw at us, which of course is no surprise that we're going to lose that one. Next up against the electric types, you can see we only have 2 wins here, Manectric and Ampharos, which is kind of bad, but I mean it's kind of expected considering we do carry that flying typing. So Luxio and Plusle are definitely going to be our two ties there. And if we look all the way down at the bottom, of course the Rock Boys are going to be the hardest matchups, while Magneton, Pachirisu, and both Raichus actually are rolling up at the very bottom there. So the electric typing, to no one's surprise, is a pretty big deal up against the Yanma here. Next up against the grass types, we do have some interesting matchups here. We basically only have 3 losses, and if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you can see Sceptile, Snover, and Exeggutor are our 3 losses there. Oddly enough, I think Sceptile actually, while gaining Dragon Claw doesn't actually put it at any more of a type advantage up against many things, it definitely makes Sceptile way more of a better generalist in this cup, and I think that he possibly could be one of those sleeper type Pokemon that a lot of people possibly could forget, oh, Sceptile had Dragon Claw, and then they're just going to go up against a Sceptile and just see massive amounts of damage and a lot of shield breaking coming at them really fast. Snover, going to be, having access to some ice type moves, is definitely going to put a damper on our flying type there. And Exeggutor, Exeggutor's just going to have an insane amount of damage right out of the gate, so all those do make quite a bit of sense, but other than that, Tangrowth is a tie, okay? And then basically outside of that, we went up against every other grass type, which is to be expected here. Now up against the normal types, this one's like roughly 50-50. I saw like pretty much half and half on wins and losses here. So some of the more notable wins, if there are any, Girafarig, Pidgeot, and then there's some ties up against Baneri, Pidgeotto, Staravia, and Swellow there. And then after that, it's pretty much just downhill. So Delcatty, Noctowl, we do see Linoon there, we do see Miltank. Yeah, unfortunately, there's not too many like crazy good matchups. You see Vigoroth is a loss. Wigglytuff down there at the very bottom is also a loss. So the normal types are kind of 50-50, but the more relevant normal types are definitely going to be losses for us, which is kind of unfortunate. So now let's actually take a little bit closer look at some of the meta-relevant Pokemon up against Yanma. Something that we should also note here is that PvPoke has changed the Pokemon that they deem meta-relevant. It used to be 22 Pokemon, now it's only 17. So what that actually means is they ended up removing Breloom, Cradily, Heracross, Ivysaur, Pidgeot, and Scyther from the actual meta section, but they did add Wigglytuff in there, which of course Wigglytuff being a meta relevant Pokemon I think is pretty fair. Breloom, Heracross, those do kind of get pretty much canceled out because of Wigglytuff now, so they're less relevant, but I definitely think they're still formidable, especially if you can kind of get around the Wigglytuff, or if your opponent just doesn't have Wigglytuff. I definitely think they're still pretty viable. Cradily, it's kind of in a weird spot because grass and rock, but it did have some stuff going for it. I did actually use it in the budget team building video, but I didn't really see a whole lot of people like saying that, oh, I have to have a Cradily. Like, it was relevant, but not as relevant, so I can understand why that one fell off. Ivysaur, why you gotta do my man Ivysaur like that? You kept Venusaur. Like, what? Pidgeot, I guess that's okay. He was kind of the only other normal flying type that was super relevant. Noctowl definitely does have a lot better matchups, so that one's okay, I guess. And Scyther, you took out like 3 of my favorite Pokemon out of this entire freaking meta. Ivysaur, Heracross, and Scyther, those are like my boys. Those are my boys, man. Why don't you take them? But anyways, up against the entire meta here, we're actually going to look at our 0 versus 0 first, which is actually a 47.1%, which is quite in line with our entire cup being a 47.8. So that one makes a lot of sense there. Now here's where it gets a little interesting. In the 1 versus 0, so when we have an extra shield up versus the opponent not having any shields, we actually end up only winning 58.8. So that's a relatively low number compared to what we're used to seeing in this type of shield situation. So Raichu, Magneton, Wigglytuff, and the Rock Boys are all going to give us a pretty big problem here up against our Yanma, which most of those make sense. Unfortunately, they're just too good to really overcome there. In our 0 versus 1, we actually end up with a 5.9%, which is actually pretty much in line with our entire cup number there. The only Pokemon that we can still end up beating if they have complete shield advantage is Victory Bell. Kind of underwhelming. Last but not least, we do have our 1 versus 1, which is a 29.4, which is also relatively low. So that also goes in line with what we said about the entire cup. You definitely have better chances closing as a Yanma rather than opening. If all shields are exhausted, you pretty much have a way better chance at winning up against the meta here. So to visualize some of these, we're actually gonna go over into PV Poke. We're gonna do Wing Attack, Silver Wind, Ancient Power just like before. We're gonna do 1 shield for ourselves. This time though, we're gonna do a custom group with 1 shield. We're gonna quick fill it with the Jungle Cup meta. Once we hit battle, you can see that 1v1 we do have our 29.4, and you can see that Vespiquen, Victory Bell, Vigoroth, Venusaur, and Masquerain are the 5 wins that we actually do have in that 1v1 shield scenario. I think Vigoroth is definitely the most important one there, considering that Vigoroth can kind of just run around and do what he wants in most matchups. It's definitely nice to have a Pokemon that can actually end up beating him here. Vespiquen's also kind of nice because it could be used as the anti-Vigoroth on the opposite team. Victory Bell and Venusaur are definitely going to just be outputting tons of neutral damage towards the Vigoroth, so still also kind of in that anti-Vigoroth reign. And then Masquerain, Venomoth being our only tie, and then you can see Knocked Out Fortress, Beedrill, Lantern, Magnezone, Scizor, Wigglytuff, Raichu, Magneton, and the 2 Rock Boys down there at the very bottom, giving us the most trouble. So honestly, like, after looking at Yanma so much more in depth than we did for the Versus video, I actually felt pretty strong about Yanma after that Versus video. I was like, you know what, Yanma actually seems like he's pretty decent, but honestly, like, after digging deeper into some of these shield situations and looking at some of these numbers, that's actually a pretty hard sell for me, considering that it's going to be so expensive to get. I mean, 1470 is max at level 40 with 15s. That's pretty expensive. And to max that out and only have a 29.4% in an even shield situation up against the meta, or to only have a 44% win ratio as the leading Pokemon up against anything in the cup, that's a pretty hard sell. I mean, I could see the merit. I could see the off-meta-ness because we do have some interesting moves here. We're relatively fast. I mean, there's not too much like downside in this area. I really do think that the biggest downside comes in this area because we're just not as stat driven as some of the other Pokemon, because we just don't have a super high TDO. I mean, we're really glassy when it comes to our stats, and I don't know, I'm just not digging the Yanma personally, but let me know what you guys think of Yanma down below. And of course, this is what we're gonna have coming up next in the next couple of days. I've been forgetting to mention this, but we do have the Mirror Cup announcement coming up on Thursday. It should be on the 18th this month, so that is going to be really exciting. I haven't really done much speculation on the Mirror Cup, considering I've been pretty much digging through these Pokemon for the Jungle Cup. So we may actually... Let me know what you guys think the Mirror Cup is going to be. I mean, I've seen some really interesting ideas like sprouting around in the Discord servers here and there. I think that possibly the coolest one that I saw was like fire and sand makes glass, which glass is used for the mirrors. And I was like, oh, that would be hilarious if fire and ground are featured in this cup, and then possibly like ice is also in there. Like, oh, that would be so cool. That's my basic prediction, is fire, ice, and ground. I definitely think that those 3 are super, super cool for the Mirror Cup. That's just my speculation though. Let me know what you guys think the Mirror Cup is going to be down below, and I will go ahead and start that ending footage. Well, you've made it to the end of the video. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. Thank you so much for watching. Of course, if you do have any ideas for content, please drop them down in the comments below. I'll be happy to look at those for you guys. Of course, if you want to join my personal Discord, get to talking to some people that have a similar outlook as myself, definitely go down into the description, join that Discord there. If you want to become a Patreon, there is a link down in the description for that as well. My outlook on Patreon is I don't want to put anything behind a paywall. This is what I do. You guys get every bit of what I make, and I don't want to limit that to someone else just because they can't pay for something. I didn't think that was fair. If you want to be a Patreon, just know that you're literally doing it from the kindness of your heart, wanting to support me, and I appreciate that. you don't even understand how much. There are a couple of other options if you would like to join the community here on YouTube. It's very similar to a Twitch-like subscription where it's a dollar amount per month depending on where you live, and then that monthly fee basically gets funneled to me every month, and you do get a couple of special perks here on YouTube like some badges and some emojis or whatever. I honestly think those are only for live streaming, so that may not be the way that most people want to go, but that's an option if you want to. Other than that, if you'd like to follow me on Twitter, that link is actually going to be down in the description as well. And until our next video, guys, that should be it. Thank you so much for watching and hanging out, and until our next video, I will catch you then.